Hello and welcome to the Sports Up here on ESPN Radio 1420 and also 107.1 FM on this Monday. And yes, the day after my Kansas Jayhawks fall to VCU. We're going to talk about that first. We'll also talk about some Twins baseball. Right now they're taking on the Pirates, losing 3-0. We'll also talk with Tom Dosh later on in the show, head coach of Northern State football. But right now we got a special guest on the show. This is Pat Strathman, who works there in the sports department at the student radio station in Lawrence, Kansas, 90.7 KJHK. First of all, Pat, thanks for joining us here on the show. What's the mood like in Lawrence today?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
But the mood on campus, it's really hard to describe it because it's very, very lowly, to say the least. When you're walking around on campus, there's not too many people who really want to talk to you with a smile on the face, not too many laughs going on. And I can tell you what, for the first day of the year, I have not seen one Kansas Jayhawk basketball player on campus. I usually see at least 2 or 3 a day. Today, I have seen none so far.
Wow. Yeah, they obviously probably wanting to hide their head at this point. And it's something that, you take away, obviously, the big national championship in 2008. It's something that KU fans are becoming all too familiar with, losing these games in the NCAA tournament to double-digit seeds. Why do you think this has been going on?
It's really crazy when you think about it, because Kansas, I mean, a lot of the articles that you read, no one likes to root for Goliath, and I think a lot of people agree with that. A lot of people want to see the people to knock down Kansas. I mean, VCU was definitely the number one case, but when you look back in history, I mean, it's definitely been something of a pattern, like Bucknell and all of them. And I think last year's team and this year's team, I think there's a good way to describe it. And I think last year's team, they came in with a big head and a big attitude. And I think Northern Iowa was a huge check to that team. And that's the main reason why they knocked off Kansas, is because I think they had a bigger head and had a hot attitude. Now, this year's team, a little bit different. I don't think that was the case. I think VCU, just the luck of the draw, VCU come in, they had the perfect recipe to upset any team in the nation. And that's when they come in and you shoot so well from 3 points, you do so well at the 50-50 balls, and, I mean, just the ability to slow down the pace, make your free throws, and convert. I mean, those are the lethal weapons and the recipe to success for VCU, and that's why they're in the Final Four. And I think Kansas just has bad luck in the draws in the tournament.
Pat Strathman joining us from 90.7 KJHK in Lawrence, Kansas, talking some college basketball here on this Monday on the Sports Hub. And you mentioned that game last year. KU falling to Northern Iowa, big upset a year ago. A lot of the players from last year's team on this year's team, almost all of them. And so that's why it surprised me when I read that before the game, Marcus Morris goes over to one of the players for VCU and says, well, you guys have had a nice run, but it ends today. And just for him to say something like that, knowing that anything can happen in the tournament, to give a team even just a little bit more fuel, I was just surprised that Marcus Morris did that. At the same time, a very cocky group. You saw him in the tunnel the game before, kind of getting into it a little bit prior to that tip-off, and then with smack talk here today. So it seems like the team, even with that loss last year, still a little too overconfident.
Yeah, just a little overconfident. I mean, when he come in with a chip on his shoulder, that's what King needed to do. And that's the one thing that they did. I mean, you can go back and forth saying how VCU played out of their minds. They played so great to be a number one seed. Well, really the case is, I'm not saying I'm rooting against VCU or I'm for KU, but Kansas, they did not convert on their free throws. And I think that's the big key here. They had early turnovers. Their free throw percentage was outrageously bad. I mean, at the beginning of the half. The second half, they did a much better job. If they even would have made 8 to 10, or I would say 10, they missed about 10 free throws, but I'd say about 8 free throws, they would have been in that ball game, hands down. I mean, the margin of victory was 10 for VCU. But KU, they brought it down to 2 points. Now, if you would have added those missed free throws, I could have believed that Kansas, they had a great shot at winning the ball game because they had VCU tired in the second half. Then all of a sudden, VCU comes out of nowhere and just storms. They went on a cold streak, and then towards the last 10 minutes of the ball game, that's when they really started to click. And I think that was the big deal for Kansas, was the fact that they cannot convert on free throws. And all throughout the year, they couldn't really shoot free throws. And the matter of fact, they shot 9% from 3 balls. That's going to kill any team. If you shoot about 23s and only make 9% of them, that's not a very good job by Kansas.
Yeah, and you mentioned the free throw shooting, KU going 15 of 28, and that was something coming into the tournament, a team only shooting about 68% from the line. You figured at some point this might come back to haunt them, and then also just their guard play, kind of inconsistency with their outside shooting. They go 2 of 21 from three-point range here in this basketball game yesterday, and those were a couple of problems this team kind of dealt with throughout the year. It came back to haunt them here yesterday, so moving forward, obviously some important areas to improve, but just a lesson to be learned for any basketball team. You got to make your free throws.
Yeah, just a very simple rule. I mean, I don't know how many times coaches can stress that, but it's definitely a rule that every coach would want to definitely preach to any sort of team. I'm sure Shaka Smart does the same thing, as well as Brad Stevens and Butler. I'm sure every single one of those coaches do the same thing. And when you look back at Kentucky, not back at Kentucky, at Memphis when they played Kansas back in 2008, that's one thing that haunted them as well, was their free throws as well. And I think it kind of came back to haunt Kansas in the end.
We got Pat Strathman joining us on the Sports Hub today, KU student, and also works for the student radio station 90.7 KJHK there in Lawrence. And the Morris twins, now are you hoping for a lockout in the NBA next year to make sure they're coming back? Have you heard anything about them coming back? It's just juniors, so they would be losing only Little, Morningstar, Reed, so you'd have to like their team next year, but a lot of it depends on them coming back.
Yeah, it depends a ton on them coming back. And, I mean, when you look at their stats, it's really incredible when you look at it. I mean, Marcus and Markieff, everyone was talking about how Marcus was just such a great NBA talent. And I think Markieff this year just stepped up his game as well. I mean, when you have Marcus averaging 17 points and 7 boards, Markieff averaging 13 and 8. Now, wishing for a lockout, I definitely don't wish for a lockout. That's for sure. I mean, I want to see basketball of some sort. I'm a big NBA guy, big NFL guy, I just like every type of sport. But when you look at this Kansas City team, if they do lose Marcus Morris and Markieff Morris, because it's not going to be one person moving on. It's either you get both of them in the NBA, which will probably be, mid-first rounders. I haven't really checked the latest NBA stuff, but I definitely know they are definitely first-round picks, without a doubt, probably top 15. Now when you look down the roster, you look at Josh Selby. That's a key position that KU needs throughout the years, and they've really been lacking that throughout the years. And if you lose Josh Selby, who really struggled throughout the season. I mean, he only has about 8 points a game. I mean, he doesn't really do a very good job from assist ratio or rebounding ratio or anything like that. His shooting woes have continued throughout the year, and he got hot against Richmond, but BCU, he played terrible as well as the rest of the guard play. But if you lose Josh Selby to the NBA, which I think has a good chance of doing so, but I don't think he's a good first-rounder. If he does leave, you'll be seeing that Xavier Henry hangover like he's been doing so far in Memphis this year. Xavier hasn't done much. And I think Josh Selby could be the same way. Now, another rumor going on in Lawrence is that Thomas Robinson, or T-Rob as mostly everyone wants to call him, Thomas Robinson supposedly might be considering leaving for the NBA as well. Now, I think that's a little too far-fetched. I think he needs to stay at least a couple more years. He's definitely a 4-year type player, or at least improve for one more year. But Thomas Robinson, just because the fact that he has so much problems with his family, that his little sister is practically by herself. I mean, it's a good possibility, but I don't see that happening. So if I had to choose right now who's all leaving, I think Marcus Markieff are guaranteed, but that loss to VCU, I think it could keep him here for one more year to get a championship.
Oh, and KU fans certainly hope so, because then you're talking about a group coming back next year, could be preseason number 1 if the Morris twins do return. It's hard to think about next year, though, because it's so difficult to get to this far in the tournament to the Elite Eight. So hard to think, next year about what could happen, because obviously you were hoping that this KU team would end up winning the whole thing. But what about Bill Self? He came on in 2004. And he was able to do fairly well, leading KU to the Elite Eight his first time around, losing to Georgia Tech. But he's got losses now to Bucknell, Bradley, Northern Iowa, and now you can add VCU to the list. And all these teams, maybe they would have beaten anybody in the country on that day, but you got to think this trend going on with KU basketball is something that people are definitely talking about. Obviously, nobody's going to be calling for him to be fired. He did win the championship in 2008, but have you heard of people there in Lawrence, in the Kansas area, being critical of Bill Self's coaching?
Well, as far as going around and talking to people about Bill Self, I think you get a lot of positive attitude regardless of whether or not they win or lose, because I think you can talk about that it is the coach's fault, but at the same time, if you watch that VCU game, a lot of what the players did, free throws was the main point, turnovers, and just stuff like that. and the players' shot selection were just absolutely terrible. You should not be shooting jump shots against a team that you're definitely taller against. But I don't think that's Bill Self's fault. I think Bill Self really tried to do all he could, but around this area so far, Bill Self, the talk around the town, I don't think anyone wants him fired. I don't think anyone wants his head cut off or anything like that. But they definitely are starting to take more notice about the trends. And I actually had talked to a couple guys, and I've seen a couple of statuses on Facebook and all these Twitter updates, and it's unreal that some people think that he was out-coached by Shaka Smart, who actually is a really good coach. I agree with that. He's one of the highest coaches in the NCAA right now, and same with Brad Stevens. Both of them would be top of everyone's list to try to get at their big-time schools. But Bill Self, there's a couple players a couple people around Kansas that definitely don't want him around. But I still don't think that's anything, possible, because Bill Self, he did win a title, and I think that's the main reason why he'll stay here. Plus, he has a new AD, and just he's got to be here for a couple more years at the most. If he goes even farther than that, I'll be really surprised. If he doesn't win a title, I imagine, and he keeps having this trend, I imagine that sooner or later the AD, Shane Zenger, is just going to go ahead and cut him loose.
Yeah, we'll see. We got Pat Strathman, a KU student, joining us here on the Sports Hub at a 90.7 KJHK there in Lawrence. A rough day for people there in Lawrence. I definitely feel your pain after another tough loss. This time it's VCU. And moving forward, all right, I don't know if you're like me. I don't even really care anymore at this point to watch much more college basketball. But moving forward, you got VCU, Butler, Kentucky, UConn. Are you one of those people that's going to say the winner of UConn, Kentucky, that's basically your national champion, or do you think a Butler or VCU could compete for one?
It's really crazy because VCU is one of the highest teams. Butler is the same way. It's really incredible because UConn and Kentucky, when I thought Kentucky and UNC, I thought the main deal was whoever goes to 80 points will win the ball game. First one to reach 80 will get the win. Well, obviously, they didn't reach that high of a score, but Kentucky's been playing very good basketball right now. Calipari has really coached a team that has really took a long time to gel, and I think Harrelson is the big key there. And I guess against UConn, obviously it's just a one-man show with Kemba. It's really tough to say that one of those two winners would definitely be, without question, the one of the better teams to win in the championship. Because if you look back last year, Butler is Cinderella team. They played against Duke. What if that shot by Gordon Hayward that he threw up would fall in? If you think about that, that would went in. Butler would have done an incredible job and get that title. And I think if Butler did that last year, why can't Butler do the same thing? Well, that's Gordon Hayward, don't get me wrong, but you still got Sheldon Mack has been playing out of his mind in the tournament, and Brandon Hayward's been playing a great job as well. He's been doing as much as he can for that team. And VCU is playing one of the highest. They have the perfect recipe for success. They won the 50-50 balls, like I mentioned. Their three-point percentage has been outrageous. They shot 48% against Kansas. That's just unreal. When you go out that first half shooting that hot, especially Braden Roselle, had a tremendous basketball game, by the way. And if you can shoot that well and execute on every possession, play tough defense, they put that pressure on against Kansas, and it worked very successfully. If you can do all those things and continue to improve as a team, they're before coming into the tournament, they were 5 of 9 in the NCAA tournament games. And now they already have themselves 5 wins under the belt, which makes them 10 of 9. So it's unreal when you think about VCU. They struggled in years past, but this year, a completely different story. And I think that VCU and Butler, whoever wins the basketball game, I think they have a great shot because UConn, obviously, they're one-dimensional on Walker. If they just stick a couple people on Walker the whole time, I think they'll be fine because it's the other key players that need to step up, a.k.a. John Lamb, that needs to step up for UConn. And Kentucky, they have freshmen. They are a very inconsistent team, but as well as they've been playing now, I see them being my favorites right now. But if they continue playing as well as they do, they'll be A-okay. But if they are very inconsistent, if there's one night where Braden Knight struggles, or Harrison struggles, or Terrence Jones struggles, one of them players struggle and no one else picks them up, I think VCU and Butler have a great chance of winning a title and be one of the lowest seeds ever in the national championship and in the NCAA to win the national title.
Well, my heart's a little broken today with the Jayhawks losing, but I'll try to still watch the Final Four. I'm probably too much of a fan not to turn on a little bit. And Pat, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. I know it's hard for a KU fan today to listen to a sports talk show, let alone be on one. So I appreciate you give me some of your time today. I know you're busy down there, I'm sure, with your studies, as always. But, Pat, thank you again. Better luck in the future for KU, but best of luck to you there as you continue your work down there at 90.7 KJHK. I appreciate it again.
Thank you very much, Alex. I really do appreciate coming on. And, yeah, my studies have been going all right, but, hey, it's always great to take a break and be on a sports talk show. Even if KU loses, I always enjoy going on shows and talking about them.
All right, Pat, you take care. Let me know if I can do anything for you in the future. All right, bud?
All right, take care.
All right, see you. Pat Strathman joining us here on ESPN Radio 1420 and 107.1. Pat does a great job covering KU sports for the student station there on the University of Kansas campus, 90.7 KJHK. Well, we're going to continue some basketball talk after this short break. We also got Tom Dosh coming on the show a little bit later on, head coach of Northern State football. Let's go ahead and take a break. We're going to come back and talk about why they should expand the NCAA tournament field and why guard play is just so important. That's coming up next here on the Sports Hub.